the doctors didn't give her a diagnosis. They gave her a death sentence in that, right? They said, your child will not live. I hated God. I hated Christianity. I thought, how could you do this to me? That God never left my side. That God never abandoned me. He never, left me and in the dust, right?
The Bible says the devil came to Adam and Eve.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead.
Jesus Christ changes your way of thinking, your way of talking, your way of walking, your way of everything.
If you believe that He's the way, the truth, and the life, then you gotta get in here. You gotta start praising Him. He gave you all of His heart. He gave you His entire life. You don't owe Him 98% of it. You don't owe Him 99% of it. I don't care if you're at 20 right now. Give Him all your heart.
I got 3 questions for you to start off. What is the gospel? Tell me the gospel. Tell me the story of the gospel in your life. And the mission for Christ Renewed is to establish a whole new understanding of the gospel into our fans. So, explain to me what you want to see changed in churches, understanding the gospel, and what you want them to say differently.
All right. So, for me, a big thing in my life with the gospel is, with my testimony, right?
Wait, what is the gospel? First?
Oh, okay. Well, the gospel it's the good news, right? It's the good news of Christ. It's the good news of everything that He's done for us and everything that He continues to do for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so the gospel in my life has presented itself in many, many ways. Most notably, it's presented myself in my testimony, when I was a kid, my mom got pregnant, and, you're thinking that that's great, and it was, until we found out about halfway through, we found out that the baby would be born with anencephaly. And what anencephaly is it's where the top part of your brain just doesn't grow in correctly, right? And with that, the doctors didn't give her a diagnosis. They gave her a death sentence in that, right? They said, your child will not live, right? So 4th grade me, that was an incredibly hard thing to hear. That was an incredibly hard thing to have to go through. And I became really depressed. I became really anxious. I became really, fearful of everything. Everything. I hated God. I hated Christianity. I thought, how could you do this to me? I hated every aspect of it, right? I got really addicted to porn. I got really, really, self-judgmental, and I hated my life. I hated everything, right? And, a couple of years later, we started to adopt. We started to foster. And we get a call for a girl. So my baby sister, her name was Amaris, right? She passed at 5 days old, right? And we get a call for a baby girl named Amari, who is 6 days old, right? And this was one of the most clean-cut, you're adopting her, there is no chance, right? And
so, the mom wasn't going to take the kid back?
The mom would completely abandon her at the hospital to go do drugs.
Oof.
Yeah. But, what's it called? In that, right, there was still a part of me that was fearful, right? So baby Amari, 6 days old, almost the same name, same age, right? Part of me still was anxious and depressed. It was Lord, why didn't I just get my sister? Why didn't I just get my blood sister,
Mm-hmm.
This is very, very obviously from you, so why didn't I just get mine, This could have, all this pain could have been prevented, So I had a heart of anger at the Lord, right? I didn't like what He was doing in my life.
Was that something that you were conscious of, or a subconscious thing?
Completely subconscious.
But if somebody asked you do you love God, you would say yeah.
Yeah, I would say yeah. It was I would lie to myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would lie to myself and be yeah, I love the Lord. Yeah, I do all this, but I would still watch porn. I would still choose actively to sin and grow numb because the Lord, I've already failed Him so many times. I can't fail Him again. And plus, He doesn't even love me, right? That was sort of the subconscious thing that was going through my head, right? And, I remember overhearing my mom one day talking to my pastor about, hey, they were talking about doing a sermon right?
Yeah, and your church was like 5,000 people, right? Like a sermon's a big deal.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
more than 5,000.
Yeah.
But what's it called? It's a big deal, you know. And so my mom, I knew, was like college friends with my pastor, but you know, like college friends, she was roommates with her, with his wife. What's it called?
Well, your mom was roommates with Chrissy?
Yeah. So we have those family connections. So I knew that they were going, like I knew that they were friends, right? But how do I put this? I didn't know that they were that close, right? Like my pastor doesn't just have like anyone go up and like talk. You have to be close friends with them, right? And so I'm looking like, whoa, wow, that's like really cool. But also, you know, I didn't really know what it was on. I knew it was on our testimony, right? And what our family had been through. So I was like, great, people can, you know, see what happened with my sisters, right? What I didn't realize is that, you know, they were also partnering with DCF, right? And so in that partnership with DCF, we brought...
Yeah, so that's like Child Protective Services for Connecticut, right?
Yeah, we brought a ton of families to foster care. Like over like 400 families to foster care, which is insane. That's so many children's lives that are made so much better, right? And so we did that, and I realized about, you know, a week later, I realized, like, wait a minute, that happened. That God never left my side. That God never abandoned me. He never, like, left me and in the dust, right? I felt horrible, right? I felt horrible. I remember bawling my eyes out because I had thought that this God had hated me. I had done awful things in, like, the hatred of God, and it was awful, right? It was my lowest low, right? And then I felt just like a supernatural, like, word in my mind that was just peace, right? And I felt that, you know, it was like a thought that, like, wasn't my own thought. It was a thought that was something that didn't come, like, from me. It wasn't something of my own power, my own volition. But when that word came into my mind, my entire body filled with just an instant peace. I was bawling. My tears instantly dried up. You know, my tears everything just stopped. It was like time froze, and I fully knew that that God didn't hate me. That God didn't abandon me. He didn't dislike me for all the horrible things that I did, right? Instead, he loved me even still, right? So I turned away, right? I surrendered my addiction to porn to him. I surrendered my everything to him, right?
How long has it been since you've watched porn?
Like a year, over a year and a half, right? It was insane. It was such like an instant change, right? And that change it made my life 100 times better. You know, so that aspect of the gospel of, you know, Jesus coming, dying, being born again for that sin that I didn't realize, like, for that I didn't realize I needed, like, that saving I didn't fully realize that I needed was insane. You know, and still to feel that, and feel that so radically, and feel that so drastically was an incredible experience.
Yeah, that's a powerful story. So your sister, you fostered her, right?
Yeah.
How old is she now?
She's 4.
All right. Do you think like foster? Are you like a really big thing like with the way God works on foster care? Has that become a prominent part of your faith?
I don't know. I believe so because I've seen incredible things happen through foster
Do you
care.
think you would foster a kid?
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough because you know, on the one hand, that would be insane to foster, but the amount of, like, if God calls me to, yes, I will, right? But if not, the amount of stress, like, my little brother right now has PTSD, has, like, mental traumas and illnesses that we are struggling to cope with, right? And, what's it called? It's rough. It's the reality of foster care. It's not that it's clean. It's never never clean. It's never clear cut on what's happening. It's always going to be a struggle. It's going to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. So what's something you would want to see modern churches like do better to encapsulate the gospel?
Definitely. I don't know. That's rough because I've only really seen my church.
Yeah, your church definitely he goes to Vox in Branford, Connecticut. That's a powerful church. They very powerful understanding of the gospel. So yeah, I guess that isn't really a question that you could answer. I know for me, the church that I grew up in, the gospel was sort of like the gospel. They framed forgiveness of sins as it being okay to sin. And the problem is that the result of that was everyone fell out of the church. So I went to their youth group when I was in high school, and there were 30 kids my sophomore year, and then summer break happened, and then there were 2 people who were in high school who would go the next year. So what it seemed like to me happened was that everyone only went because they enjoyed the people that were there. They only went to hang out with their friends. And then when they weren't friends with them anymore because over summer break they didn't hang out, they now no longer had any reason to go. So that's something I've been super big on in my ministry, making sure the reason that people are there is to get closer to Jesus. People aren't hanging out with their friends, or people aren't there to hang out with their friends. Not bad hang out with their friends. But people, the reason they're there. We just reviewed my sermon journal from my high school Jesus club. Yeah. And I open it up, and the first thing that's in there is a reminder for me to tell people, don't use the candy that we're handing out to say, you should go to get candy. Because there's no point in them being in the room if they're there to get candy. So what are the things you see at Vox in this gospel that you think is so good?
They address that, it's gonna be ugly. They address that it's going to be hard, and that following Jesus is not a clear cut. You're always going to know exactly what to do. They address that it's not going to be a life that is magnificent. It's not going to be a, really, you come in on, the highs. It's not going to be a life of highs. Mm-hmm. They address that there is going to be lows, that there is going to be...
Yeah, and those moments of you not knowing what to do are, the most important moments. Because it's like John the Baptist said, he must become greater, I must become less. The moment of weakness where you know nothing, except for that you have to, just go all in on Jesus. When you've hit a rock bottom and you're just okay, the only action that I can commit that I know is going to be good is to actively seek Him through prayer, Bible, fasting. Those moments are that's where you find life. That's where you find Jesus. In those moments of weakness, God said, "My power is made perfect in weakness."
Yeah, especially those moments where it's just you. Right? Where it's just you, late at night, in your bed, somewhere, and you're just, you can't deal with it all anymore, and you can't do it alone, and you have to rely on someone, and then you fully realize, I can't do this alone. I need God's intervention. I need something more than me.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments are the greatest for your growth. Those moments are the moments that will redefine you as a person, and they will reshape you and reshape your thoughts and reshape your actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That idea of having nothing except for Jesus when you hit those points, it's so important. The disciples, there wasn't a single one of them who didn't face the death penalty for following Jesus. And Jesus said, if you stay faithful to me to death, your reward will be life. In the book of Revelation, he said that. And I think that something super big about staying faithful to that point is there are a lot of preachers who are like nervous to give a sermon like that, and that's another big issue that with a lot of things when we preach like a moderated gospel, because there's a story in John 6 that I just talked about on the Instagram recently, where Jesus, it says that crap, what did he say? I don't remember what he said. But then his disciples go up, or many of his disciples go up to him, not the 12, but the others. They went up to him and they said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" And then Jesus said, "Did I offend you? Blessed is he who is not offended by me." And then the 12 went up to him, and then he went up to the 12 and he said, "Will you guys also leave me?" And then Peter says to him, "Lord, to where shall we go? You and you alone hold the keys to eternal life." And I think that's so massive for when you're leading people to Jesus of it does not matter if you can manage to get someone to listen to a moderated gospel. Because Jesus said, those who are not with me are against me. It's either all in or all out. There's no halfway. There's no 98%. 98% and 0% are the exact same. I heard this great expression. What do you call the person who graduates last in their class in med school?
A nurse?
Doctor. You call him doctor. It doesn't matter how much you fail by or how much you pass by. You are either a child of God or a slave to sin. There's no in between. There's no third area or middle zone. So it's so important for us to be all in. Not 98%, not 99%. Every single second of your day to be actively glorifying Jesus. I think that that's something so many people, they've heard it and they know it, but they don't believe it. It's not a reality. It's this thing that I do, or it's Sunday morning, and I know that I'm going to get closer to God if I go to church. But I'm going to stay home from church to work so I can make some cash. But it's not that big a deal because I'm still seeking Him with 90% of my heart. I pray for 10 minutes after work to substitute it in. And I'm not saying that you're always going to need to spend your Sunday morning at church, because there are totally ways to glorify God other than church. But what I am saying is that if you stay at home on Sunday to play video games, then you're an idiot. It's just a dumb choice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have definitely felt that before. That feeling of you want to go to church because you know why you should go to church, but there's other temptations, and that's why they are temptations. They're hard to fight, The temptation to just stay home and sleep, the temptation to, play video games. It's, it's a thing where you have to surrender it to God. As in, you have to say, Lord, you are greater than this video game. You're greater than sleep. Mm-hmm. You're greater than, sleeping in. You're greater than...
That's such a big one, sleeping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus would wake up at, said he would wake up very early while it was still dark and then pray for hours. And when dreams are the most spiritual thing ever. You literally create an entire reality in your own mind. That is when you are most in touch with your heart, your inner desires, your dreams, all that stuff. So if you are in that state when you wake up, that is when you're going to have the most powerful prayers, the most powerful, scripture readings and stuff.
But when you dream, that's when your heart is the most vulnerable. That's when you're most likely to fall into temptation because, in a dream, you don't remember, here, how do I phrase this? When you're in a dream, your defenses are down, right? You don't have your friends there to help you. You don't have, the church. You don't have your Bible right there next to you. That's when you're, at your weakest. When you're dreaming, that's when the enemy will try and attack you, right? So having the sort of strength and faith in God to be able to resist temptation in dreams and to be able to, resist struggle and have, faithful and pure dreams that are from God is such a massive thing and is so important for the Christian faith.
You know what I find so interesting about what you just said? You were like you talking about how your defenses are down, and you said like you don't have your friends there. And growing up in the church that I did, the people there, they weren't there to see Jesus. They were there to hang out with their friends. I never really thought of like other people around me as like a way to get closer to God. And now that I've been to your church a lot more, Vox, definitely the people around me are like a way to get closer to Jesus and stuff. Like very powerful, like moving to see someone like on their knees before in worship. Like that's something that I think every single place should have worship that's able to get someone to worship on their knees. I think crap, I completely blinked on what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I love how the people around you are like encouraging you in your faith and stuff. What would you say to someone who doesn't have people around them who are encouraging them in their faith and they don't know where to go?
You need to be that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by that is, grow in your relationship with Christ, right? Find people that mesh with you, learn from them. Find, people that are really active spiritually, learn from them, Even if you're finding people not in real life, but through Instagram, right? You're going on Instagram and you're seeing people that are very spiritually active, Think about the Drip King. Think about, some of those like really heavily Christian people. See what they're doing.
Caleb Baxter on ChristRenewed?
Ooh.
Caleb Baxter? Yeah, what's super big to know about when you become that person that can encourage someone in their faith, which is a necessary part of following God, that doesn't mean that you're going to find someone who can do the same. My sophomore year of high school, I didn't have a single friend at my school the entire year. Because there was one Christian in my entire school. There were a ton of people who believed in God. They were at church on Sunday. But Saturday they were at a party. So they weren't genuinely Christians. They didn't genuinely love God. So I was a outcast and imposter and stuff. I wasn't treated like that. Like I could have had friends. There were people who I could have had very close friendships, but I didn't want to hang out with them because my priority was Jesus. And I ended up, because of that, applying to graduate a year early. And then my junior year, I ran the Jesus Club at my school, and completely different social life. Like way more socially active, talking to people all the time. Because now it was about Jesus. Like I was social networking to get people into the club, get people deeper in their faith. One thing that's super big is I'm way better at teaching somebody about Jesus in conversation than during sermons. Yeah. I haven't watched one of my sermons from the perspective of an audience member, so I couldn't tell you if I'm good or not at preaching. But what I definitely receive, I definitely see Jesus work through conversations I have. So that became a super big part of being Jesus Club, of running Jesus Club, having those Jesus related conversations.
Yeah, I think something that really helped me, especially in my walk and in my everything, is stuff like you had me preach once at your Jesus Club, right? And that helped me so much in terms of, faith, because that was a step. I didn't do sermons. I didn't, preach and do much stuff.
That was your first sermon, right?
Yeah, that was.
Best sermon I heard at Jesus Club.
Yeah. What's it called? It was a step of faith, right? Not gonna lie, I didn't take notes, I didn't do anything like that, right? I knew sort of what I wanted to do, but then getting up there and saying, Lord, I give this to you. Saying, Lord, this is yours. Do with it what you will. Right?
I think not taking notice is such a great way to have the Holy Spirit work through what you're doing. Because Jesus said to his disciples, like I said, they all faced the death penalty. They were all going to get persecuted. So he told them, when they put you before the courts, do not plan out what you're going to say ahead of time, because then the Holy Spirit will speak through you. And that's something I do. I write down the Bible verses I'm going to use, and then that's it. And that's one of the reasons why I like conversational discipleship way more than preaching, because I don't like planning out what I have to do. And obviously, it's not bad to take notes for a sermon. Like Jonathan Edwards, he would write out every single one of his sermons. They were historic. But it's definitely, if you're willing to take the step of faith and saying, I know for a fact that if Jesus has a plan for this Jesus Club or this church or this youth group or whoever you're preaching for, then there is a 0% chance that I will give a bad sermon. I have never once, throughout all my time at Vox Church, his church, heard a bad sermon on a Sunday morning. And I've probably heard 6 different people preach at Vox. So, like, if that many people have preached, probably some of them are bad preachers, too. No, actually, I've probably heard more like 10 different people preach. Not a single one of them have given a bad sermon. And the reason why is because God has a plan for Vox. Their lead pastor, Justin Kendrick, is a great guy, very Jesus-loving. And God has called him to lead a ministry. So God is going to make that happen. Before I ran my Jesus Club junior year, one of my youth leaders, he comes up to me, he was on prayer team on a Sunday morning. And he comes up to me and he says, very clearly God said to me, I'm going to use you as a leader in this year. So there were points where I was starting my Jesus Club when I first started, where there were more people in the room who were there to finish up homework with the teacher who's the room it was in than there were attending the club. And that was incredibly embarrassing, incredibly horrible. I hated it. And what I hated most of all was leading up to it, I had no idea if there was going to be someone there when I showed up, or if I was going to be going home after not doing anything. So I kept going, though, purely because God had prophesied that. I would have ended the club right there if he had not said, I'm going to use you as a leader this year. And now, there's like friggin' 10 kids, there was like 10 kids every week after that, or after I like kept pushing. And it's so important to understand that it's reality versus what people think. I heard something smart. I was talking to some guy about Jesus, and he was like, well, that's what you believe. Like, you believe that happens when you die. And I'm like, I could believe that I'm a tap dancing flamingo. I am not a tap dancing flamingo. Reality is reality, and it does not change based on what people think. So that's one of the big things about like what happens when you die. There's no you show up to the gates of heaven and then you go, oh no, don't worry. I didn't believe that this would happen when I died. Then they go, oh, okay, don't even worry about it. It's still the same thing.
Yeah, I think that, especially the difference between reality and, your thoughts. Reality and your sort of, not expectations, but like what you think. Reality and your opinion is that, the reality of the situation, the reality of Christianity is, this is real, right? Jesus Christ bled and died for our sins. He did it while loving us. He did it with a love that we didn't deserve, that we can't deserve. He did it for people that would never be able to deserve his love, right? And yet he still loved us so much, right? So every second, like, the reality is we should be, like, showing that love. We should be, like, showing people, not just, our friends, not just, like, the random strangers. We need to be doing that in our homes. We need to be doing that, to our siblings, to our family members. We need to do that to the people at our houses, which is where, we can be vulnerable, which is where we oftentimes get messy in our houses, because all the pretenses of, oh, I should be like this, I should be this way, they all go down when you enter your house, But if we could get it to where the reality of our heart and the reality of our life is that we love Jesus and we show his love to everyone, like, regardless of how they treat you, regardless of, if you're not friends with your older sibling, if you're not friends with your younger sibling, regardless of how they have treated you in the past, if we can show that love to people, that would set us apart as Christians, and that show the reality of Christ.
Mm-hmm. You know what I find so interesting? Yeah. People are willing to speak to their siblings, like, me especially, completely differently than they speak to people outside of it. Like, I remember being maybe 4 years old, and my little sister walks in front of the TV, and then me, my older brother, and my older sister all yell in unison at the top of our lungs. No! Just yell it. No! She jumps scared, and then she gets out of the way really quick. And I just find that crazy. Can you imagine, like, looking at just a random stranger and just yelling, no! And Jesus said, like, a prophet is not without honor, except in their hometown and around in their family, or in their hometown and in their own household. And I think so much of that comes from, like, when we look at our siblings, we don't want to be, like, we don't look at them as people, because there's nothing to risk with your siblings. There's a sign in my grandpa's house that says, I smile because you're my sister, I laugh because there's nothing you can do about it. It's interesting, when there is nothing to lose, we feel no need to have respect for anyone, because it's not like your sister can just unsister you.
Yeah.
It's not like your mom's gonna put you up for... Actually, no, mom's different, because they can intervene. But, like, when moms guilt trip you and, like, come at you and do stuff that they, like, shouldn't do, it's not like the kid can do anything about it. It's, like, the difference between the way the older brother acts to the little brother versus the little brother. And I think I am making a point. I'm not just rambling about random sibling antics. The way that we act when we have nothing to lose demonstrates the way that we act when we have stuff to lose. When Jesus talks about fasting and prayer, and he says that when the Pharisees are doing it out in public to make the whole world see how great they are, they have done nothing good. They will receive no reward, because what they are doing is not honoring Christ. And I think that extends so much bigger than that prayer and fasting, because of the difference between the way we act to people when there's something they can do about it and when there's something there isn't.
Yeah, I think that, the way that we act in our own homes, a thing that my mom used to have is, you're only as holy as you are in your own home, right? You're only as, like, Lord gratifying as you are in your own home. If you're going outside and you're like, oh yeah, I love God, look at me, I have my cross necklace. Or yeah, I love God, I have a Bible verse in my Instagram bio, right? But then you go home and you're like, well, guess I'm going to go watch porn again. Or like, oh, guess I'm going to go, do this thing again.
In my first church, like my first youth group, there was this girl who was there every single week at youth group. And she was, like, supposed to be one of the, like, most, like, devout kids in the youth group. And then she breaks up with her boyfriend, and he hit, like, a pit. And because she, like, brought him to youth group once, this is the kid I was trying to reach out to with the gospel, and he comes up to me, and he's like, and he sends me a picture of his screen time. And it had 7 hours on the Bible. Crazy transformation with this kid. And we're talking about repentance and stuff, and, like, we're talking about faith. And I find out that he's been having sex with this girl in high school, completely outside of marriage. Obviously, they're in high school. For, like, the entire time they were dating. So, this girl who's supposed to be a staple for, like, this is Christianity, was actively violating God every week, probably, with her boyfriend. And I just find that absolutely crazy how that's become, like, a normal thing to happen in a lot of churches I go to. Like, a lot of places I go to. I remember I was at this summer camp, and there was this program for, like, kids who like, they already have a relationship with God. And so, like, there was an interview process. They asked you questions like, what are your views on premarital sex and stuff like that, to, like, make sure that you actually have a relationship with God. Because the point of it wasn't to grow you in your faith, it was to grow you as a leader, like, as a teacher. So I had a genuine conversation with kids who were interviewed to get into a program to say, like, this person is already saved. Like, I think the goal was, like, every single person in that room should be in the book of life, have a relationship with Jesus. and I had a genuine conversation with them, trying to make them understand that it's a sin to masturbate. Like, that is not. That is a. I think when Jesus said narrow is the road to heaven, it's way more narrow than we realize, and it's way like tighter than we realize. It's it's dumbfounding, the world that we live in. But that's why I started ChristRenewed, because of those people. Most of them wanted to go into ministry. So those people who don't even realize that it's a sin to masturbate are going to become pastors and start teaching people. So I want to instill a whole new understanding of the gospel into people, because I was at that youth group where there was no one there who genuinely followed God. And I don't like the idea of... I became way distant from God with the amount of hate that I had towards the people I was around. And I don't like the idea of not having anywhere to turn. When I was able to find Caleb's church and get integrated into Vox, like, the difference in my faith was completely night and day. Like, complete flip. And I don't... If a genuine preaching and the genuine gospel can help someone as much as it did me, then I want to be able to... I don't want someone in freaking San Diego, California, to not have anywhere to turn. So now they can just open up Instagram and then hopefully get a good message of the gospel.
Yeah. I think that, reaching people, because so oftentimes we don't reach people because, well, let's just be real, they don't mesh well with us, right? As in, we don't reach out to people that don't believe the same political things as us. We don't reach out to the people that, are weirder. We don't reach out to the people that need it the most as Christians, We don't reach out to those people that are diehard atheists that, curse the name of God and say that all things Christian are evil, right? We don't reach out to those people because it's uncomfortable, but there's an essence of living in that uncomfortability. There's an essence of, these people need it the most. We have to go out. This is a calling. We have to go and bring them, because narrow is the road, Narrow is the road that leads to life, but wide is the road that leads to death. So many will be on it,
Yeah. I find what I think is so interesting about the diehard atheist. I was the most diehard atheist ever my freshman year of high school. And I just told you about how my sophomore year of high school was a year that I spent completely isolated because the only thing that I wanted to do was glorify God. The night and day flip with those people, like, I would totally recommend trying to see if God's calling them. Because what this trademark of a Christian who's going to hold on to the narrow road to heaven is someone who's going to be devoted to their beliefs and their ideals. I was crazy devoted to whatever I believed. If I didn't believe it was right, I was not willing to do it. And that was very prominent in my atheism. But when I became a Christian, it completely flipped up. So there are all these people in the churches. That girl who I told you about, who was supposed to be a leader in the youth group, but she wasn't, she already knew what was right. She knows that the Bible is the fundamental law of the world, and that we have to follow it. But she wasn't doing it. She doesn't do what she believes is right. So it doesn't matter if I have her at a youth group, or if I show her a ChristRenewed Instagram reel. She's not going to just magically become a devout Christian. What the people that are going to be genuinely following God all in, not 90%, not 80%, but 100% in, are the people who are 100% in on what they believe. And so if you're looking for, like, people to lead to God, like ministry opportunities, look for those people. I believe with every bone in my body that God is not going to put somebody who's in a position to be a good leader at a circumstance where he isn't going to bring any of them to there. Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And that's something I've seen time and time again. The harvest is plentiful. My goodness, like, I would just go up to kids who have absolutely no relationship with God and just say, hey, come to Jesus Club. And they would just show up, and then they would start coming every single week. The harvest is totally plentiful. So why would God not put you to work if you have a genuine love for him, and not bring people to do it. I find it interesting. What Jesus said was, he said, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers out into the harvest. And I see so many people at Fox, like I'm about to list off a bunch of names that you guys do not know at all, but he knows. Basically, they're just good people, and I'm going to explain the meaning behind it. Like Chris and Christian, like, who are in a point in their faith where they could be a pastor. If they were in charge of a church, it would be a very healthy and powerful church. But they aren't doing it because they're like nervous. Or actually, Christian probably isn't nervous. I think Chris is nervous. Christian, I think it just hasn't really like come to him. They aren't like leading Bible studies, like taking the roles that people like Kellen try to take on in Gabe. And if that's you listening at home, like, step out in faith. God is going to use you. It makes utterly no sense for him to not.
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing is, like, when we say step out, stepping out doesn't just entail taking one step, you know? Oftentimes when you step out, you go into a free fall, right? You have no control. It's not just like oh, I stepped out, I can step back in. It's when I step out, I can't go back in, right? When you step out in that faith, when you step out and you take that step, taking that step entails you're in, right? There's no turning back. There's no, oh, I tried, it didn't work, I'm going back, you know? There is no redo. That step is final. That step is an absolute. So if you're able to take that step, and you do, you will see the rewards. You'll see the results of that step of faith.
And what I find so good is when you take steps of faith that like you can't turn back from. Like if you quit your job to start a church, like you can't turn. That is your salary now. Because in the parable of the sower, Jesus talks about the seed that springs up really quickly, and then the sun scorches it. So that happens all the time. People are so all in on Jesus, so devout, and then they fall away. And it's so good to be taking steps like that, because then you can't go back. You're now rooted down. It said because it had no root, it withered away. You've now been rooted in. Like if in high school, when I ran the Jesus Club, if I just decided to be an atheist, I would have lost my entire social life. When I was dating this girl from my church, if I decided to be an atheist, I literally would have lost my girlfriend. If you can find stuff that to make Christianity a fundamental part of not just your inside life, make it every part of your inside life. Every single thing that goes on inside your heart should be Jesus and just Jesus. But if you can make it a fundamental part of your outside life too, then that makes it so much easier to make your inside life Jesus.
Yeah.
Alright, Caleb. I know this is something that you've been wanting to do for a little bit. ChristRenewed merch. It's not out yet. This is just a little teaser. It looks drippy. Like, we wear this in our everyday... I wear this in my everyday life. Yes. We haven't gotten him in yet. That's how, like, new this is. He doesn't even have any. But, like...
It's unironically, it's so insanely comfortable. We have tank tops on under this. Like, it's so...
And how much are you getting paid to say this?
$0. It's... I would recommend buying...
Hold up. Should we show off the ChristRenewed tank tops?
We can.
Alright, let's show off the ChristRenewed tank tops. We figured that to film a Christian podcast, it would be better if we wore the hoodies, not the tank tops.
Yeah.
But,
these are so tough. Right? I love the black one. Right? It's so snug. Right? Boom. Boom. It's so nice.